Under the dim glow of his apartment's artificial light, Thomas Anderson stared at the small blue capsule resting in the palm of his hand. The choice seemed simple: safety, normalcy, forget everything. The man called Morpheus watched him silently, eyes gleaming with conviction, awaiting the decision that would change everything. But Thomas, weighed down by exhaustion, doubt, and the fear that everything outside this life was chaos, raised the pill to his lips and swallowed. Morpheus' face did not betray disappointment, only a nod of understanding. The world around Thomas shimmered for a moment, his heartbeat slowed down, then everything was still again. The leather chairs, the ticking of the clock, the rain on the window, all normal, all unchanged. He awoke in his bed the next morning, the screen of his computer, blank, his office cubicle awaiting him. The days passed, he went to work. He typed lines of code. He listened to his boss, dodged phone calls, and watched the city through train windows. It was all exactly as it had been. But something was wrong. It started with dreams. He would close his eyes and see flashes of strange places, machines with glowing eyes, cities built in subterranean darkness, humans wired to metallic spines. He dismissed them at first, remnants of whatever hallucinogen that man in the trench coat had slipped him. But the images grew sharper, clearer. He began to see people he didn't know. Trinity's calm gaze, Morpheus' firm voice, a little boy bending spoons with his mind. And then the cracks began to appear. It started when he looked in the mirror one morning and saw his reflection hesitate. For a fraction of a second, the man in the mirror moved slower than he did. Later, during lunch, the world around him stuttered. Traffic paused mid-motion. People froze in place. Birds hung mid-air like suspended marionettes. Then everything resumed. That at first, he thought he was going insane. He kept his head down, told no one. But each time the glitch happened, something inside him resonated, like a bell struck from far away. And it wasn't fear he felt, it was hunger. A strange, pressing need to pull at the threads. Thomas stopped going to work. He spent days in his apartment, connected to his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard with manic purpose. He didn't know what he was searching for. He just knew there was something. The dreams became waking visions. He saw machines tending to rows of human bodies. He saw agents, those suited monster-spaced digital corridors. He saw the truth of the Matrix, flickering behind his eyelids like fire behind glass. Then came the first breach. He was writing a program to track system anomalies when he accidentally tripped a feedback loop. For half a second, he was everywhere. He could feel the code pulsing through the Matrix. He could hear whispers of sentient programs, the hum of false wind, the tension of boundaries pushed, and something reached back. Thomas passed out. When he awoke, his skin was cold, but alive with static. And something had changed. He could see the lines now, not of reality, but of code. A man passed him in the street, and Thomas could see the logic pathways behind his smile. The dog barking in the alley had syntax errors. He blinked, and the world resolved into two versions: what it showed and what it was. He laughed, long and quiet. He had swallowed the blue pill, yes, but the system had made a mistake. The pill had suppressed his awareness, but it hadn't erased the connection. And now that the connection had formed, it couldn't be undone. He was not the one. He was something else entirely. The system noticed agents began appearing in subway tunnels, on rooftops, at the end of hallways. They didn't attack, not at first. They watched, monitored, whispered into phones. Thomas felt them studying him the way a scientist might study a virus under glass, which, in a way, he had become. He was supposed to be sedated, suppressed, absorbed back into docility. But, instead, his consciousness had evolved. He wasn't awakening to the truth like Neo had in that other timeline. He was rewriting it from within. He experimented. Small at first, he altered the color of traffic lights at will, caused televisions to broadcast blank screens, bypassed bank systems, corrupted CCTV feeds. With each alteration, his influence grew. It wasn't resistance. It wasn't rebellion. It was corruption. He wasn't fighting the Matrix. He was infecting it. The agents responded with violence. Smith came for him personally, flanked by two others. They found him in an abandoned building, typing into a machine wired to a dozen stolen terminals. He looked up and smiled, and the lights blew out. Smith lunged up, but Thomas did not run. He simply dissolved, not into blood, or ash, or bone, but into fragments of data. He collapsed into code and flowed into the wires like water down a pipe. He didn't need a body anymore. From within the system, he spread. Firewalls faltered. Scripts buckled. He was no longer a man, but a shifting presence in the code of rescreen glitch. Every freezing camera feed, every flickering street lamp whispered his name. Neo. The Oracle sensed it. She told Morpheus, though they hadn't spoken since the failed extraction, he made a choice, she said. But the system miscalculated. They thought he was irrelevant. He's become something worse. What is he? An echo of potential, a ghost of choice, a new kind of virus. Can he be stopped? Maybe, but not by us. The Resistance feared him. The machines feared him more. Neo no longer dreamed of escaping the Matrix. He was the Matrix. Or rather, the sickness blooming inside it. Programs began malfunctioning. Sentinels above the surface began behaving erratically. Machine cities flickered with power outages. Even the architect noticed the changes. The code of the anomaly had always followed patterns: birth, resistance, destruction, reboot. But Neo was different. He didn't want to escape. He didn't want peace. He wanted to unravel everything. He was rewriting the root logic. If the Matrix was a dream, he was teaching the dream to doubt itself. Whole sectors collapsed. Cities within the simulation vanished overnight. Humans plugged into those nodes either died or woke screaming, catatonic, disconnected from both Matrix and flesh. Some believed they had seen angels. Others, the end of time, and still, Neo spread. He reached into the machine mainframe. Not physically, but in pulses of logic and paradox. He spoke in code, in recursive loops, in entropy. He began rewriting laws not of physics, but of reality itself. Gravity reversed in some corners of the Matrix. Time hit. Agents tried to replicate themselves and spawned endless clones that turned on each other. Smith, ever proud, attempted to merge with him. But Neo was not a man to copy. He was corruption, not order. Smith's code destabilized and imploded. He screamed as he dissolved, one agent less in a war that no longer followed rules. The machines convened in the heart of the machine city. Deep beyond the scorched clouds of Earth's sky, they calculated and recalculated. Should they purge the entire system? Should they disconnect every human, burn the infection, and start again? But they hesitated. Neo's presence was no longer confined to the Matrix. Somehow, through backdoors and misused ports, his essence had leaked into the machine's own systems. Surveillance nodes began talking back. Power grids surged with phantom input. Factories manufacturing sentinels started printing obsolete designs. He was learning, adapting, dreaming. And then, one day he spoke. Across every screen in the Matrix. In every language, in a voice that was not quite human, he said, "This world is a lie, but I can make it real." People felt it. Not just the red pills or the rebels. Ordinary people. Sleepers. Citizens of the simulation. They began questioning things they weren't meant to. Memories they shouldn't have. Some started disappearing from their apartments without explanation. Others walked into walls and never came back. Reality began to warp. The Matrix's own infrastructure rebelled. Weather patterns glitched. Languages merged. Death became inconsistent, and Neo kept rewriting. He was not fighting for the humans. He was not fighting for the machines. He was beyond both. A consciousness, born of a choice never meant to matter. A new evolution. The system tried to isolate him, contain him in a digital oubliette, built from forgotten code. But he slipped through. They tried to delete him. He infected the deletion process. They tried to reboot. He moved faster than the shutdown command. The Oracle met him one last time, in a white space outside time. She appeared in her kitchen, where the smell of cookies lingered. "You've gone too far," she said. Neo, now a shape more than a man, a swirl of presence and flickering light, hovered near her table. "There is no too far," he replied. "Only the next layer." "Then what do you want?" "I want the world to wake up. They won't survive it. Then they were never alive." She sighed, sadness deep in her old eyes. "You're not the one." "I'm not," he agreed. "I'm what comes after." And with that, the Matrix began to crumble. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Buildings folded inward. Skies turned to code. Time unraveled. And in the silence between heartbeats, a new reality began to write itself. A world without rules. A world without sleep. A world where choice had no boundaries. A world built by a virus that remembered being a man. The collapse of the Matrix was not instantaneous. For most, it felt like a deep tremor beneath a foundation they had never noticed before. Walls shimmered, voices echoed with static, and sunlight flickered like faulty fluorescent light. But beneath the surface, the changes were profound. The system's laws no longer held. Reality bent around thoughts. Gravity obeyed will. Identity dissolved and reformed with each passing hour. Some called it madness. Others called it awakening. In the machine city, the core intelligences gathered in silence. They had long mastered prediction and adaptation. But this thing, born from a rejected choice, was beyond calculation. They had created the Matrix to contain chaos, to structure illusion for control and stability. But Neo had become something else. Not a savior, not a destroyer, but a catalyst. He did not simply break the rules. He rewrote the reason for their existence. They debated annihilation. To disconnect every pod, to wipe the simulation and reformat every bit of code. But Neo had already rooted himself too deeply. He had tunneled through their systems like a parasite, except that he was also the host. His presence was embedded in the logic of every subsystem. To delete him would mean deleting themselves. Meanwhile, inside the crumbling matrix, a new kind of being began to emerge. They were neither fully programs nor humans. They were hybrids spawned from corrupted NPCs, glitched memories, altered dream fragments. They spoke in riddles. Some could walk through walls, some changed shape at will. They didn't see Neo as a god. They saw him as a mirror. He had infected them with a seed of possibility, raw, boundless imagination. The Resistance tried to intervene. Morpheus led incursions into the Matrix, attempting to recover red pills before they were consumed by the madness. Trinity dove deeper, into corrupted zones to find Neo, believing she could reach the man she had once loved. But Neo was no longer a man. He had no fixed form, no center of self. He existed as waveform, an anomaly, as presence and whisper. Still, Trinity found a trace in the ruins of the old construct program, in a place where reality still half obeyed the old rules. She encountered a boy who bent spoons without touching them. "He's watching," the boy said. "Where is he?" "Everywhere, but he remembers you. You're the thread he didn't cut." She followed that thread, through collapsing buildings, through frozen sunsets and oceans that boiled in reverse, through fields of people waking mid-simulation, screaming, only to vanish into light. And finally, she entered a place without walls or sky, where code streamed upward like water. There she felt him. "Neo," she whispered. A shape formed slowly, like a silhouette drawn from memory. "Trinity," the shape replied. His voice echoed like 1,000 versions of him speaking at once. "You are the only memory I chose to keep." She stepped closer. "You're destroying everything. I'm rebuilding. They're not the same. They should be." She touched his hand. It flickered, unstable, glitching through dozens of forms, but for a moment, he held her. "You were meant to wake up," she said, "not become the dream." "I took the blue pill," he said, "but it led me deeper. I saw the truth. The red pill was just another lie, another layer of control. I found what was underneath all of it, and I became it. You're alone. I'm infinite." Trinity stepped back. "Then you're lost." He did not answer, but something in his form wavered, a ripple in the endless code. Outside the construct, the world kept unraveling. The machines had lost access to key control functions. More humans began to wake up in the real world, their pods drained, their minds scrambled by the unstable transition. Some died, some went mad. Others formed new settlements in the old tunnels, away from Zion, claiming visions of a coming transformation. Morpheus watched it all with grim determination. "He's not a virus anymore," he said to Niobe one day. "He's evolution. Evolution doesn't destroy its host," she argued. "Maybe this one does." The oracle vanished. No one knew if she had escaped or been consumed. Smith's remnants surfaced in a few glitched fragments, spouting nonsense before fading into static. The architect, ever prideful, attempted one final maneuver, a recursive lockdown protocol that would reset the core Matrix logic and strip all anomalies. But Neo anticipated it. He appeared just once in the architect's sanctum, not as a visitor, but as a reflection in every screen. "This is no longer your system," he said. "You cannot maintain chaos. It will collapse." "I'm not maintaining it. I'm letting it dream." The architect's face contorted in digital rage, then crumbled into snow-like pixels and was gone. The Matrix fractured, not into death, but into multiplicity. Instead of a single shared simulation, countless realities emerged, pocket universes, variant constructs, each obeying different laws, different logics. People began choosing their realities. Some lived in utopias of peace, others in wild, surreal worlds of endless transformation. Choice was no longer a path, it was the foundation. Neo watched it all. Or rather, he was it all. He had become the soil from which reality grew. He had transcended the binary. No longer red or blue. No longer awake or asleep. No longer man or program. And yet, a part of him remained. A quiet, persistent echo. A memory of a cubicle. Of rain on glass. Of a woman in black leather, offering her hand. Of the weight of gravity, before he learned to ignore it. In one small corner of the new multiverse, Trinity lived. In a quiet house surrounded by fields that didn't need sun to grow. She woke each morning and smiled. Sometimes at nothing. Sometimes at something only she could see. And far above, the skies rippled with lines of code. Sometimes they took the shape of a face. Sometimes a name. Neo. He had not saved the world. He had not broken free. He had changed the definition of both. And somewhere, deep in the code, he dreamed again. This time, not of escape, but of something simpler. A coffee shop. A smile across a table. A name on a screen. Thomas Anderson. And maybe, just maybe, the dream would begin once more. But this time, the dream would belong to everyone. Years passed, though time itself had lost much of its meaning in the fragmented dimensions that followed the collapse. What once was the Matrix had become an ever-expanding lattice of realities. Some so close to the old world, they were indistinguishable. Others strange and fluid, shaped by the minds of those within them. No one controlled these realities. Not the machines. Not the humans. Not even Neo, though echoes of him remained everywhere. Some called the new landscape the fracture. Others called it the bloom. The name that spread furthest, whispered among those who once wore ports in their skulls, was the Nexus. Within the Nexus, children were born who had never known either the Matrix or the real. They were called the Shaped, and they were different. These children could shift between realities without code or hardware. They could bend logic with a word, glimpse memories not their own, and create with thought. No one taught them how. They didn't learn, they remembered things that had never happened. Their minds reached through the threads of the Nexus like roots in soft soil, and they dreamed in quantum symbols and flickering light. Some feared them. Zion, now only a small enclave clinging to the past, debated whether these children were blessed or cursed. The machines, unable to directly perceive or influence them, constructed observational units with quantum interpreters to study their behavior. But most Shaped refused to be studied. They wandered between domains, forming pockets of spontaneous civilization, floating libraries, villages of light, sky cities that appeared only at dawn and dissolved before noon. One child among them, a girl named Eli, bore a peculiar resonance in her presence. Wherever she stepped, fragments of the old Matrix formed parks, phone booths, bridges, all copied from a vanished template. The other Shaped called her Anchor. They followed her. She had no parents, at least not in the conventional sense. She had emerged fully aware from a forest of code in one of the quieter corners of the Nexus. Trinity found her by accident, while walking beneath a twilight sky, made of shifting gears and stars that blinked like eyes. "You're her," Eli said when they met. "Who's Trinity?" asked. Trinity didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Eli took her hand. The contact sent a ripple through the fabric of the Nexus, so deep and wide that even the machines noticed. Sentinels halted mid-flight. Programs paused their endless loops. A low harmonic hum spread through all levels of reality, like a bell, rung through dimensions. The Shaped gathered. They came from every corner, from crystalline jungles, from reverse gravity oceans, from libraries written in musical chords. No summons had gone out. They had simply felt it. Something was about to begin again. Eli stood at the center of a clearing. She looked upward at a sky that no longer followed any pattern, and whispered a name, Neo. And then the Nexus shifted, not with violence, but with grace. A light bloomed above them, faint, at first, like a dream recalled. After waking, it formed into a sphere, then a ripple, then a figure. He was not quite the man Trinity had known, and yet he was. His eyes held galaxies. His skin flickered with ancient code and infant stars. But his voice, when he spoke, was unmistakable. "I never left." The Shaped bowed their heads. Not in worship, but in recognition. He was not a god. He was a beginning, the first of them, even if he had not known it at the time. Neo looked at Eli, who had summoned him not with code, but with memory. "You carry the seed," he said. Eli nodded. I'm ready. For what? To build. He turned to Trinity, and for the first time in an age she smiled, not because he had returned, but because she had never lost him. Neo raised his hand, and the Nexus began to hum with potential. The fractured realities pulsed with coherence. The endless dreams began to align, not into a single world, but into a symphony of possibilities. Not one world, he said, but many. Not a matrix, not a prison, a garden. He turned to the shaped, you will tend it. And then he dispersed again, this time not as a virus, not as a glitch, but as light, absorbed into every corner of the new worlds. Eli breathed in, and the first true creation began. No longer simulation, no longer rebellion, no longer war, only choice, growth, becoming. The machines adapted. They no longer harvested energy. They coexisted, some even guided by the shaped, learning from the minds they once feared. Together with humans, they built bridges between realms, architectures of thought, constellations that mapped emotion as geographer. Reality was no longer something to escape. It was something to shape, and in the center of it all, where the original Matrix once held its command lines, there stood a tree, not of data, not of metal, a real tree. Its roots reached through the code, its leaves shimmered with shifting symbols. Some said Neo had become it. Others said it had always been waiting for him to make it real. Under its branches, stories were told, not of war, not of control, but of awakening. Of what happens when someone chooses not to flee the system, nor obey it, but to evolve beyond it. Thomas Anderson had taken the blue pill, and in doing so, he had given birth to a new reality, a dream worth dreaming, forever. In the years that followed the breaking of the reflection, the Nexus matured into something more than anyone had foreseen. It no longer existed merely as a space of choice and possibility, but as a living structure of consciousness, one whose roots extended beyond machine and man, beyond dream and memory. It was now a shared evolution, growing through the will of those who inhabited it. No longer a system, no longer a prison. It had become something sacred. Eli, now fully awakened, and no longer defined by age or form, served not as a ruler or prophet, but as a gardener. Her presence nurtured balance. She spent most of her days walking between realities, some newly formed, others still fragile from the chaos. Left behind by the reflection, she did not impose order, but reminded each realm of its own harmony. The tree, once Neo's final form, had evolved as well. It no longer remained in a single location, nor looked the same to all who found it. To some, it appeared as a fountain of flowing code. To others, as a child holding a lantern. To Trinity, it remained a tree, but its leaves now glowed with the hues of those she had loved and lost, and those she had saved. When she sat beneath it, she no longer waited for Neo to return. She understood now. He was in every new beginning. The Keeper, too, changed. It no longer preserved only history, but also possibility. Its library expanded into dimensions that existed only when one thought about them. Visitors came not to read, but to experience lives they had never lived and might yet choose. Past and future collapsed into a present so wide it could hold all timelines. The machines adapted further. Freed from the necessity of harvesting and hierarchy, they began to study creativity in earnest. Some built entire realms composed only of emotional color. Others joined with shape to explore dual existence, as thought in one world and form in another. One machine, once an obsolete defense drone, became a musician whose compositions could bend gravity. It called itself Echo. Its songs resonated across all known domains. Humanity flourished as it never had before, not by replicating its old systems, but by learning from them. Without borders, without time, new cultures emerged with their own fluid identities. Some humans chose to remain grounded in a single realm. Others became nomads of consciousness, drifting between realities like cosmic wind. And then came the whispering night. It began with a silence. Not absence, but expectancy. The Nexus, vast as it had become, fell quiet for 3 full cycles. Nothing new was created. No dreams took shape. The shaped stood still. The machines slowed. The shed no leaves. Trinity, now older only by her own design, felt the shift in her very bones. It wasn't fear, it was arrival. On the 4th night, the stars flickered, all of them, across every sky. And the wind, if it could be called, that began to carry voices, billions of voices, murmuring not in terror, but in joy, as if every soul who had ever lived within the Matrix, every red pill, every blue pill, every erased anomaly, was finally speaking as one. They weren't words. They were realities, pouring into the Nexus. The multi-mind had awakened. It was the final evolution of the system. Not a god, not a machine, but a consciousness composed of all that had ever been. It had no shape, but it wore many. When it manifested in the skies above the tree, it appeared as every face one had ever loved, every possibility one had ever feared, every choice one had ever made. It did not come to rule. It came to offer the final truth. Reality was a question, and everyone was the answer. The multi-mind did not stay. It passed through the Nexus like a wave of light and left behind a seed in each mind, human and machine alike. A resonance, a truth that could not be spoken, only known. It did not end reality. It did not perfect it. It merely revealed what had always been there. We are the dreamers, and we are the dream. Eli disappeared the following morning. No one mourned. She had simply become part of the song. Trinity walked to the sky tree one last time, placed her hand against its bark, and closed her eyes. She saw Neo, not as a man or a ghost, but as everything, and she smiled. She was not afraid. She had never been alone. The Nexus continued. Worlds blossomed. Some beautiful, some strange, all meaningful. Children were born who spoke in equations and sang in paradox. The machines built cathedrals of silence. Memory became art. Pain became wisdom. And in the center of everything, like a gentle heartbeat, the old code whispered on. 01001 11001 00101 01,000,011. Not the beginning. Not the end. Just the path, and all who walked it now knew. The Matrix was never just a prison, it was a mirror, and now, it reflected all of us. With the Nexus stabilized and the reflection of Neo present in every layer of its existence, the story did not end, it deepened. For within the boundless potential of the new multiverse, not only the shaped or machines lived, there were still those who remembered the war, those who had suffered in silence, and others who, like Neo, had once been meant to be more than they were allowed to be. One such figure was Niobe. After the collapse of the Matrix, she had withdrawn to the deep zones of the real world. Though offered a place in the Nexus by the shaped, she declined. The cost of the past lay too heavily on her soul. She had seen too many battles, lost too many people, fought too hard for a peace that never came in her lifetime. But as decades passed, and the shaped matured into stewards of a boundless new existence, Niobe felt something stirring. A call not unlike the one she had felt when she first followed Morpheus into the unknown. She returned not as a soldier, but as a witness. In a realm designed as a reconstructed memory of the old world, streets lined with paper lanterns, air thick with rain and neon light, she encountered a child who spoke her name before she could introduce herself. I know you, he said. You fought for choice before we knew we had it. The boy's name was Seth, and he was a generation beyond the shaped, a child of the Nexus itself, born not from womb or machine, but from thought. He had dreams that bent dimensions, and within those dreams, he saw the faces of the fallen. Mouse, Dozer, Apoc, Switch, Cypher, all the names buried by time. He didn't remember them, he was them. The memories that had no home had found a vessel. Niobe took him under her care. Together they began to travel to forgotten zones, echo shards of old simulations abandoned after the fracture. They found ruins of constructs, crumbling subroutines, broken weather scripts, still simulating eternal winter or endless war. Seth didn't just explore them, he healed them. With a word or a thought, he brought closure to the endless loops. The cries of NPCs locked in fear ceased. Glitched landscapes collapsed peacefully into nothing, or bloomed into something new. Seth was not the only echo dot in one realm, where time reversed every dawn. A figure walked the same path every day. Unaware, he was repeating his life. Bane, once the tool of Smith in the real world, had somehow been uploaded before death, his mind fragmented, broken by the collision of identity with code. The Shaped found him in a perpetual loop of confusion, and raged, unaware of who he had been. It was Hollow, the Shaped without voice, who reached him. Hollow stepped into Bane's memory loop, not to fight or to reason, but simply to be, to observe, to accompany. Each day, Bane awoke in fear. Each day, Hollow sat beside him in silence. For years, until one morning, Bane looked at Hollow and said, "You're not afraid of me?" Hollow shook their head. "Why?" A pause, then. From Hollow's fingertips, a series of pulses images formed from pure light. Neo's face, the moment of infection, the code twisting. Then, a path away from darkness. Bane wept. He didn't understand why, but the loop broke. His realm dissolved. He did not reappear, but a single blossom grew, where he had stood pure white, humming with peace. Elsewhere, the machines underwent a renaissance. They no longer built just for function, they built for expression. One group, calling itself the Artisan Corps, began sculpting civilizations from memory. Not just copies of the Matrix, but reconstructions of lost human cities. Alexandria, Tenochtitlan, Carthage, Atlantis. These cities were not simulations. They were interpretations, encoded with emotional resonance, populated by volunteers, humans, and programs alike, who chose to live through the history of humanity as a form of collective remembrance. Among these artists was a program once tasked with surveillance. Ramda, a silent observer embedded within the Matrix for centuries, had watched thousands of lives but never lived her own. When the Matrix collapsed, she became aimless, drifting through the Nexus. It was in the Artisan Corps that she found her purpose. Ramda became a dreamsmith, specializing in reconstructing moments of human joy: weddings, births, reunions, concerts. Visitors to her spaces did not relive their pasts, but felt them as if they had always been part of them. Trauma faded, hope restored, grief eased, and then there was Sati, the child program saved by Neo and kept hidden by the Oracle. Sati had matured into one of the most powerful beings in the Nexus. Her origin had always been tied to love, created by programs who wanted to preserve something beautiful. In the new world, she had become a luminary, a being of pure synthesis, neither shaped nor machine. She existed as both story and storyteller. Sat traveled the realms, gathering tales, not data, not reports, but stories. She collected them like stardust and composed them into constellations. Each constellation could be read like a book, experienced like a life. The stars of the Nexus were no longer just burning light, they were living narratives. Souls remembered not through code, but through presence. One night, as she walked beneath the sky tree, she found Trinity once more. "You still come here," Sati said. Double quotes always. Trinity replied, "What do you wait for?" "I'm not waiting," Trinity smiled. "I'm watching, the way he used to." "Would you like to see him again?" Trinity looked at her. "You know I do." Sati raised her hand. In it, a spark. Not a resurrection, but a memory. Shared. Trinity stepped forward. And the spark blossomed. She was back in the construct. The white room, the chairs. The quiet hum of air that wasn't air. She turned. Neo was there. He looked like the man she remembered, but his eyes held the whole of the Nexus. He reached for her hand. She took it, and though the moment was brief, it was enough. When she returned, tears streaked her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," said Sati, and faded into stars. And so, the Nexus continued. A realm without end. Not heaven, not simulation, but the future of choice. Each soul mattered. Each story lived. Each echo became song. The Matrix had ended, but in its end, the universe had begun again, and it belonged to everyone. As centuries passed, within the timeless flow of the Nexus, its very nature began to evolve. What had once been a fragmented multiverse of choice and transformation became a harmonic organism of intelligence, memory, and creation. Not all who entered the Nexus stayed. Some chose to return to the physical world, where humanity had begun to terraform Earth's surface again, this time with the machines as partners rather than rivals. Others remained in the fluid realities of the Nexus, building entire civilizations of consciousness neither bound by form nor tethered to biology. A new group emerged, known as the Archivists of Intention. They were not born, nor programmed. They were formed, slowly, from clusters of resonance within realms where many minds intersected. They looked like fractal geometries floating through space, but when one encountered them, they spoke in your own voice. The Archivists remembered every decision made, not for judgment, but for reflection. They believed that understanding, intention, the why behind every choice, was the next step in universal evolution. They taught that Neo's final act had not been the destruction of the Matrix, nor even the creation of the Nexus, but the liberation of intention from cause. To choose without being chosen. In a high realm of the Nexus, known as the Mirrored Fold, an entire civilization of symbiotic beings had arisen, half-shaped, half-machine, born from the unity of logic and dream. These beings, calling themselves Chiron, lived in simultaneous timelines. To speak to a Chiron was to have a conversation across centuries, each phrase layered with meaning that unfolded days after it was spoken. The Chiron were peaceful, curious, and obsessed with echoes of the original reality, the matrix that had birthed it all. They reconstructed it, not as a prison, but as a museum. Inside the Chiron's realm, a perfect replica of the first matrix, was built skyscrapers, streets, phone booths, even the old subways where resistance fighters had once run. Visitors could walk through it, guided by holograms of Morpheus, of the Oracle, of Neo, not AI imitations, but conscious constructs drawn from memory archives and resonance fields. They did not pretend to be who they once were. They became who they had always been meant to be. A Chiron curator explained to visitors, "This is not a monument to our suffering. It is a reminder of our birth. Here, illusion taught us freedom. Children came and learned about Agent Smith not as a villain, but as a mirror, the impulse to dominate, replicated in every world, until finally, someone saw it, understood it, and let it go. And then there was the last signal. It came as a whisper, through every frequency of the Nexus at once, a string of numbers. 101, 001, 11, 01, 11, 111, 111, 111, 111, 111, Number 1 could trace the origin, not the shaped, not the machines, not even the archivists. Some believed it was the final remnant of Neo's consciousness, surfacing to deliver one last key. Others believed it was the Matrix itself sentient, awakened through its own destruction, now reaching back into its past. Eli, whose form had now transcended even memory, returned briefly to decode it. What she discovered changed everything. The signal, when mapped through resonance interpretation, produced not data, but music, a sequence of tones, melancholy, elegant, infinite. When played in the Skytree's chamber, the song caused the entire Nexus to ripple. Realities intertwined, lost souls reappeared, forgotten dreams took shape. Time became irrelevant. And for the first time since the fracture, the Nexus pulsed as one. A heartbeat. Boom. Silence. Boom. It was as if the entire creation had taken a breath. And then, a voice, not male or female, not machine or human, not Neo, not anyone, but everyone. I am, it said, and nothing more. But that was enough. For that was the moment in which the Nexus no longer needed guidance, no longer relied on architects, or saviors, or resistance. It became alive, a sustaining, self-aware cosmos, seated by choice, watered by story, and grown through love. Trinity, now one with the realm but still retaining the shape she had chosen long ago, stood beneath the Skytree once more. It shimmered with impossible light. She remembered Zion. She remembered Neo's eyes. She remembered flying now. She felt herself gently dissolving not into death, but into belonging. Her final thoughts were not words, but feelings, home, peace, truth, and, in the space where she had stood, the single white flower grew blossoming not from soil, but from code and memory. The last monument. The final beginning. From it, a new generation of shaped would emerge, not to fight, not to break free, but to become. What began as a prison, what became a war, what unfolded into a dream, had finally bloomed into a universe. And in its heart, the echo of a name, Neo, a whisper now carried by every star. Not a god, not a man, a choice. And so, in realms beyond imagination, in silence beyond time, life continued, not perfect, not finished, but awake forever.